Alright, ISIS, or the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, have very quickly come to dominate the news and media cycles here in the West. And given how pervasive this issue has become in our public discourse, in this project I'm going to very briefly take ideas that we've discussed in class with ideas that have been presented by different reporters and different intellectuals in the news media, and I'm going to bring them together to sort of contextualize ISIS and how we can view it. So first, I'm going to bring these ideas together to provide a perspective of ISIS politically, and then I'm going to discuss different ideas of different solutions or ways that the United States can approach ISIS. An important concept we've learned in class is the idea of the Westphalian order, the concept of the state serving as the unitary entity within IR. ISIS, however, does not really qualify as a state under the Westphalian ideas. Yes, ISIS has ambitions of restoring a single Islamic state in the region, but ISIS is not an entity like a country. It's still fighting a war in an attempt to recreate already contentious borders. This sort of exception to the rule of the Westphalian system is outlined in the IR perspective of post-colonialism, which accounts for how certain political bodies and borders solely exist because of colonization. As a result, these states aren't as unified and defined as the Westphalian system would suggest. Rather than a state, ISIS exists more as a shared ideology, or, as the perspective of constructivism would argue, a shared social construction, which is the result of the region's relationship with other nations. Most scholars, in fact, agree that the emergence of ISIS has been triggered by the recent and ongoing Syrian civil war, the Arab Spring, and the prolonged presence of the US and the West in the Middle East. Therefore, we can conclude that ISIS can be characterized as a product of the political turmoil that exists throughout the region. Political turmoil such as the regimes of Maliki and Assad, according to journalist Ali Kaderi of The Guardian. So what we've discovered when thinking about ISIS politically is that it doesn't operate as a state the way that we see states operating in the Westphalian system, but that ISIS operates more as a shared ideology, as a social construction that has come as a result of how destabilized the region itself is.
What I'm saying is that the United States, through its policies, created the very threat that it claims to be fighting now. And in continuing this policy, what President Obama is doing is embracing the very lies that made the Cheney-Bush-Iraq war possible. And in the process, he's creating yet another generation of people in the Islamic world who are going to grow up in a society where they believe that their religion is being targeted.
Although I was not able to take a video, on October 22nd of this year at Puke Hall, I attended the open discussion on ISIS hosted by our very own humanities professors. When asked about what the US should do in response to ISIS, Professor Matt Jacobs, Professor of History and Department Head of the International Studies program here, expressed that while the most ideal response would be to not get involved with ISIS, we unfortunately must embrace the fact that the US has been heavily involved in the region ever since 2003, and consequently shares a degree of responsibility for what's happening. To pull out entirely would be to leave behind a mess we helped create. So what I've done is shown two different perspectives that are both similar and different. Different in that they have two separate final assessments as to what should be done with ISIS, which demonstrates that there really is no easy, straightforward answer. Both perspectives are also similar in that they derive from the same realist perspective of international relations. Both perspectives attempt to take the world with all of its complexities and with all the sort of inherent violence that exists, tries to absorb that face value and then tries to make an assessment based on what's really there in the world. So based on what we've discussed, ISIS exists more as an ideological, social construction in the region that's growing very quickly through violent and genocidal means, and a solution must be come up with. Now obviously we've seen that it's not necessarily easy to come up with a straightforward solution, but I have good faith that the world order will derive a good solution to be able to mitigate what's happening and allow the Muslim world to come up on its own and create its own sense of government that the people will be happy with. This may take some time, but I have good faith that it'll eventually happen, as I'm sure you share the same hope as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed my video, and I wish you a good day.